It's the bird emergency. I'm Grant Williams. I talk about birds. I like to talk about birds because I like birds. And we're going to do something a little bit different. So if you're here for some hardcore conservation, nick off. Put it that way. Today it's Photography Friday. So the gentleman joining me, and if you are watching the video, who is in classy and classic black and white, is Ewen Bell, renowned editorial photographer, my favourite urban bird photographer in Melbourne, who specialises in blurry birds. So, Ewen, what's your blurry birds Twitter account?
Oh yeah. So I've got an account called Reimagine Photo because it's one I started for the book, which I put out. And of course, I'm really, really bad at my social media, and I didn't spend too long actually pumping the book and stuff. And then I've got all these blurry shots of birds, and I thought I should actually just start posting my blurds, BLIRDS, blurds. That's a hashtag now. It's really good. And so you just basically throw up your pictures of blurry birds because we've all got lots of them. Don't waste them.
We do. I took an amazingly bad video of some masked plovers or masked lapwings the other day where you can't even see them with my iPhone because my photography skills at the moment are limited to my iPhone. But we're joined today by, let's go with amateur photographer from India, Christy Bharath. Yeah. Now, I reached out to Christy just because I liked some of the shots that he was taking. And I thought, why don't we just talk about the birds that Christy likes to shoot, where he shoots them, what he uses, and we'll just talk about photography with Ewen. So here we are. Now, Christy, how about you start by telling us whereabouts in India you are?
Sure. So I'm from Chennai, which is in South India. So here we don't speak Hindi and we generally don't watch Bollywood movies. So the Western perception of India is mostly have to do with Bollywood, but we have nothing to do with Bollywood. So we are like the foster kids of India. Not many people talk about us. And when it's convenient, they keep us locked up in the basement.
But well, cricket's the thing in Chennai, isn't it? Which is
cricket, yeah, but I'm somebody who doesn't watch cricket, so I'm pretty much a foster kid in Chennai too. Okay. But we have a wonderful collection of birds, and pretty much when I started bird watching, I thought let me first see as many birds as I can in my part of the country. It also comes from a lot of cultural misrepresentation that I'm used to, and I've grown up like wanting to fight. So I thought, let me only see the birds in South India. And then when I'm done with it, let me move to another part of the country. So I've not gotten that far, like in 9 years. So I think I'm still about 50 to 60 birds shot.
So tell us a little bit about what it's like around Chennai. And for old people like me, Chennai used to be called Madras, yeah? And so it's on the Indian Ocean side, the eastern side of the Indian subcontinent, the peninsula. What's the environment like on the outskirts of Chennai? How far do you have to go from your place to get out into what we would call the bush, the wild, the forest?
Right. So actually, I right now live in the outer suburbs. So I'm about a 30-minute drive from a reserve forest. But from Chennai, again, Chennai is like a small coastal city. So we are surrounded by the ocean. Surrounded. Well, we are on one side by the ocean, but you can basically get in and get out of the city in 2 hours if there's no traffic. So it's not a big city, but I live in a part which is surrounded by lakes and a lot of water bodies. And there are 2 reserve forests, which are both about 30 to 45-minute drive away. It's one of the reasons why I moved here. I've grown up in Madras, right? So Madras and Chennai are not the same city philosophically, because the place that I grew up in, we used to see mongooses every day. We used to see a green vine snake or a rat snake at least once a week, right? And we certainly used to hear a lot more birds when we woke up in the morning. Around the 98 to 2001, when the IT boom, thanks to Uncle Sam, took off over here, it's just changed. It seemingly overnight for somebody like me, because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So in a couple of years, Chennai became near unrecognizable, and I stopped going out a lot. And at the first chance that I had, I moved to the suburbs.
Christy, is there like an old city and then the new city, like we have here in Melbourne, where the character, the old suburbs, colonial in style, and then all the new places, like where I live now, are just sprawling new developments where all the houses sort of look the same, McMansions we call them over here.
Sure. This is the case in a few neighboring cities like Bangalore. Like there is an old Bangalore and a new Bangalore with two distinct cultural and outlook, maybe not the right word, but it looks different. It feels different. And the people over there seem different. But Chennai, unfortunately, the only places which still retain the old school ambience are the place which can only be afforded by really rich people. So.
The reason I asked that question that way, Christy, was not to talk about the architecture, but to talk about the street trees and the garden plants. In Melbourne, certainly the older suburbs have mature trees and a lot more deciduous European trees. And then where I am, all the street trees and the park trees and whatnot are usually native trees. So we don't see many blackbirds where I live, but we do see a lot of the native parrots and the cockatoos where I live. So what's the character of people's gardens and the street trees? And following on from that, what are the birds that are in your, local urban environment?
Sure. So when it comes to growing a garden, even reasonably large enough to attract birds, you need that money here. Space is of immense value. So real estate is a really big deal here. And development ate through the city like a cancer in some sense, because it left no place untouched. Every place where I go, there have been trees chopped down irrespective of what their purposes were, how long they've been. It just didn't matter at all. It was merciless. Again, the only place where I still see people nurture gardens big enough, or the community get together and say, hey, let's maintain this piece of public property and let's plant saplings here. It's again a luxury of the rich. It's not something that people from a middle class background can even begin to think as something they could do, because the government wouldn't support them. As for the birds, like when I used to stay in the heart of the city, I used to see a lot of tree pies, but besides that, I really couldn't see, because I cannot stress how the kind of toll that development took. And development is like a nice sounding word, but progress, it really depends on who's progressing, right? So in that sense, as far as at least the birds were concerned, or people who wanted to have a healthy tree count, they certainly weren't a part of the progress machine at all. But right now where I stay, there's like a lake outside my apartment. But even this, right, I don't feel like I feel a bit guilty, because there's a huge apartment, a gated apartment right next to a lake. And here I am sitting here, being able to look at some flamingos once in a while, like once a year. And then I'm complaining about these other people who are developing the city. But here I am, a part of the problem, right? So
You're an apartment liver, but no flamingos out your window.
Not so many. We do have a couple of doves that come and demand their walnuts in the mornings and things like that, and the sparrows. We get some parrots here from time to time. So usually in the wintertime, when they're starting to think about their nesting, we see the corellas will come through and they'll try to see if there's somewhere where they can sneak in or try to push out a pigeon nest. And probably in the next couple of weeks, we might start seeing the rainbows starting to come through to check things out. But in the last couple of days, we've actually been woken up by the calls of the sulphur-crested cockatoos. And that's been absolutely marvelous. They've been right in close and they've been checking things out. And there are people who can't stand these birds because they're so loud and they tear up their gardens and all that kind of thing. But for us, when you see this great big giant, a beautiful bird, this complex creature, and it comes right into where you live, that's just a gift when that happens.
So, Christy, we've all got together to talk about photography. When did you get started with your photography, and what are you generally shooting? Are you shooting from home very often, or are you always going out in the environs of the suburbs looking for your birds?
Right. So just to answer your last question first, because of the lockdown, I've not been able to go much at all, like for almost a year. But before that, from my balcony, like I said, I see spoonbills, ibises, herons, like from my balcony, not all through the year, but like a huge portion of it. But I spent very little time in the balcony itself because it was almost fascinating to have my camera there and my morning coffee and say I'm going to do this like from my balcony. But in a couple of days it wore off, because for me the best part of photographing birds is not the photography part, it's the finding part, and to actually find them and to actually in some sense convince them to give you a couple of seconds to maybe take a semi decent photo. I love the word which was used by Ewen. It's a gift. It just feels like a gift. I'm like, thank you so much for this opportunity, right? And I use a Nikon Coolpix digital camera because like when I wanted to buy one, everybody said that this is the bird watching camera if you're not a photographer. And I'm like, perfect. I'm not a photographer. I studied photography as part of journalism college, but what fascinated me back then was moments. Like I felt it like, again, I guess in some sense it was a gift too, because I thought, how lucky am I to be here? Like when this kid is leaping in the air through something, I'm like, what a luck this is, you know? And I'm not somebody who's felt lucky much. It feels like these small wins, which mean a lot to me. So that's one of the reasons why it fascinates me.
Now, before we go further, if you are listening to the show now, just pause for a moment and open up your browser and go to verseherder.com. And that's verse as in a verse of poetry, and herder as in that fabulous band that took the piss out of Courtney Love, Nerf Herder of Cows, verseherder.com. And you can have a look at Christy's shots. And I was going to ask you about your writing, Christy, because you are a little bit above average when it comes to the stories and the captions that accompany your photos. But you studied journalism, so I'd expect that now.
I'm a pretty good writer despite having studied journalism.
The chase, the finding of the birds, is that the satisfying thing for you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Like I thought that was pointed at me.
No, we're following on. That's one for you and Christy.
Yeah, look, I really tune in to what Christy was saying there is that if the birds just come to you, that's nice. But there comes a point where you actually want a bit more of a challenge in one sense when it comes to photography. But also, the thing I really love is when I get a photo of something I didn't expect, when I didn't know I was going to get that shot. And when you're traveling somewhere and you're seeing all these birds you haven't seen in your whole life, then every shot is special. But when you're in your own hood and you're seeing some birds that you hadn't seen, or if they just come closer this day than they had on previous days, and you get a slightly more confidence with the bird, then that's really special. And it's those things that you didn't know that were going to happen. They're the bits that are really wonderful. And I think that's why I keep going back out, because I don't know what's going to happen the next time I go out. And that's the joy of it.
Christy, owls. You seem to really like owls. Tell us about that.
Yeah, again, taking off from what Evan said, the first time I saw an owl, I had No, I had tweeted about it just this morning. Like the first time I saw an owl, I was in shock because I was like, how is this happening? I thought they don't come out during the day, and I thought they only come out. I had no idea that it was only barn owls that had that behavior, but even barn owls can be seen during the day. But I believed, because when I saw the owls, I wasn't a bird watcher. I was just this dude with some issues who wanted to go spend time with nature, right? So and one more thing that I really like about them is they make their disdain for me pretty clear, and they keep me grounded, because like whenever I start going off on, oh man, I love birds, it's this, they're like, yeah, but you annoy the crap out of us, dude. Maybe you want to cut that down a little bit. So that has helped me. It helped me, I'm not sure, but that has at least made me reduce how much time I spend in front of them. That has created more distance between me and them. So I try to take a few shots. If it doesn't come, I just move on. Saying, and I started developing this habit of saying I'm sorry to after every photographing. I'm sorry. You know?
And have you had a look at most of Christy's shots?
I can't say I've had a look at most. I've had a look at quite a few. Yeah. There's a lot there on that Twitter account.
Well, let's see if you agree with me. I am now not surprised that Christy's shots as good as they are for an amateur, because he's done a little bit of photography training. And what I have always liked about Christy's shots is the composition is really good. They more artistic to me than they are scientific or ornithological shots, which a lot of people take great shots of birds and they show you all the features of the birds, but you place them really well in the landscape, Christy, which to me leans towards the art rather than the science.
Again, thank you so much, Grant. But I understood everything you said except with the composition part, and I was like, he's talking about something I definitely don't consciously do.
But that's the point, though, isn't it, Ewen? A good photographer doesn't consciously think about it. It just is. It's part of the way you line up your shot without thinking about it.
One of the things here is that there's a difference between how people think about photography when they're birders and when they're photographers. I think that so many people who are really interested in the birds and that they want to check it off their list, maybe they're not as concerned about the photography other than to show the bird that they saw. They're trying to record the bird that they saw, and the art of photography is not really their concern. They're into the art of birds. And sometimes you have people who are more into the art of photography than the art of birds, like me. Like, I know a lot more about cameras than I do birds. And so I come at it from a slightly different way. And I think that one of the things we're seeing, say with yourself, Christy, you're showing the birds in their habitat on the branch that they are in. You're not trying to bring them down to a specialized stage that you've set up with food and a bird call and all that kind of stuff. You're shooting the birds where they are and where they let you shoot them. You're not trying to change how the bird is actually presented. And I have a little bit of an issue about the degree of photography where people are changing the shot. So you're seeing a bird not how it usually presents.
I wasn't even aware that happened until 2016. When I first heard that they actually set up these things, I didn't even know what was the purpose of that. What is the point? Like, where's the feeling? And it's not.
Oh, no. It looks like the internet's let us down. I'm sure Christy will be back with us in a minute or two. But, Ewen, that is a real problem, isn't it? I was a little bit like Christy. I wasn't aware that people did that. I grew up, actually, just hold the phone because Christy's messaging me, so I think he's maybe telling us some bad news. Yeah, he's restarting his internet. That's no worries. Yeah, so I had no idea that. Sorry, I sent him the wrong emoticon. Yeah, oops. I went to send him the thumbs up, and guess what is immediately below the thumbs up? blowing him a kiss.
He's going to think we're very friendly people.
That's right. I sent him the thumbs up immediately after, but I'm sure he'll be going, what? What's going on? Yeah, well, everyone's got a little extra out of that one.
That's great.
Ewen, I wonder how you can actually set up shots with so many species of birds. How do you set up shots with honey eaters? And,
I don't know. I don't know. I'm actually the wrong person to ask that, because when I found out that people were doing this, I was deeply disappointed. I felt like I'd been cheated because I'd seen all these beautiful, beautiful shots of birds and stuff. And then when I realized people were simply setting up their little pole there with either the food or the callback or both. And then when you go through their feed and it's just shot after shot of the same kind of post, but with a different bird, and it's the same shot over and over. And I'm like, oh my God, I see it now. Once you see that pattern, you see the formula, and it's like, this is not interesting. It's not interesting from a photographic point of view, but also there's something not right about it from a bird kind of point of view. If you love the birds and if you want to care for the birds, to bring them in this way just so you can get a photograph, there's something about that that doesn't sit right for me.
To reinforce that point, I don't know if you ever had that Reader's Digest complete book of Australian birds, Ewan, the one with a photograph of every Australian bird. If they were extinct or too hard to get, it was a museum specimen that was arranged to look like it was out in the wild. But without knowing it, I had that same thing. I used to flick through that book and just ignore so many of the shots. And now I know why, because so many of them were staged. And the only ones that I found interesting were shots that look like birds doing natural, normal bird things.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many people who still actually go to the trouble to put a Norwegian blue parrot that's been stuffed just to prop it up into a tree to take a photo. Hopefully that's not going on still. But yeah, when you look at someone like Christy's photography, Christy, you're out there, you're having an experience, you're enjoying this experience with the birds, and then you're taking photos to match that experience. And so the photos are a consequence of you spending time in the wild with these wonderful creatures.
Right.
Christy, what are your favourite birds to shoot?
Favorite birds to shoot is spotted owlets for sure. Barn owl is a bird that I only have one photograph of it, and that's a blurry photo. So that's it's been on my mind like for a long time. Great Indian hornbills. I love shooting them.
Christy, before you go on with the hornbill, where you need to put your barn owl shot, you've got it. That's got to go up on blurs.
Yep. Hashtag blurs.
Hashtag blurs. Yeah, the hornbill. That are they common near the urban areas?
Oh no! So they cannot be found anywhere close to my city. I'd reckon I'll have to go about 600 kilometers. So to a place called Kerala. So they can be found there in South India. In North India, they're a little more widespread. So in North India, there's a problem of excessive hunting too, because their beaks are known to have these fake medicinal properties. And also some of the tribes there, they wear the feathers on the headdress as a sign of royalty. So so hunting is a major problem there. In South India, it's just the good old habitat loss. We don't care about where hornbills live. So
one of the birds that you have got featured on the top level of your website is the Siberian stone chat.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I'm guessing that the Siberian stone chat is a migratory visitor to India. Are they common?
Oh no, but that I cannot call. I was taken there by somebody who knew that they visit that place because he had seen them a couple of times that month. So we went there and it was there. So it didn't. But when I first heard about it was in 2014 or so, when there was like a signboard somewhere which said that this bird came from Siberia. I said, get the hell, it can't be real, because I really knew nothing about birds before I started. So the concept of migratory birds was maybe they come from a neighboring state. They came from Burma and like Siberia, and it blew my mind. And yeah.
You and owls. How do you go with your owls?
I don't have a lot of pictures of owls myself. I've got a few of the tawny frogmouth in various parks around town, and even then, they just sit there and sleep all day. What I do have, I've got some shots in Bhutan, in the Himalayas, of the Asian barred owlet.
Oh.
And the thing that makes that bird interesting is that the bird call for the owlet, if you play that bird call, every bird that can hear it goes crazy because they don't like the owlet. And I think it could be because maybe the owlet preys on all the nest of other young birds or something along those lines. And so if you don't know the bird that you're trying to find, or so if you don't know the call of the bird that you're trying to see, you just play this bird call of the owlet.
And
for 30
they'll
seconds.
come from everywhere, will they?
And birds just come from everywhere, and they come in and just to check it out and see what's going on, and they just go crazy. They really do.
Christy, the migratory visitors, are there a lot of them that come to your part of India?
They do. And to be honest, like it's been oscillating. One year there's like a higher count, the next year there's like a reduced count. Like I'd like to say that it's been constantly reducing because of global warming and habitat loss and all that, but certain years seem to go up. But over here, the bigger challenge is our biggest wetland is also the biggest garbage dumping site. It's ridiculous to even like say that sentence, right? But then that's how it is. So that used to house like a lot of migratory birds, and they are being affected big time. And the next biggest hotspot for migratory birds is Vedantangal Bird Sanctuary, which is actually the oldest bird sanctuary in the country. In that sanctuary, I'm giggling while saying this simply because I've spent a lot of time being angry about it. The forest department is going to denotify around 2 kilometers of land around the sanctuary, saying that,
Wow.
oh, the birds are just on the lake. It's no problem. And they're going to sell more land to a pharmaceutical company. It's just how it is.
Well, we'll talk about your setup now, Christy, but I just want to make a corny joke. What stunning wetland doesn't need a few more broken down fridges and washing machines thrown in there? That's what you tend to see in the sort of swamp areas that are neglected around here. Why do people throw their old fridges in wetlands? I don't know.
Seriously?
Yeah. No, it's very hard to get rid of white goods. I think it's just expensive, so they chuck them in the reed beds. It's crazy. But Christy, tell us about your setup with the Coolpix. What model are you using, and what lens have you got? And are you taking a tripod with you? Can just tell us all about how you get your shots.
Actually, so the only thing I have is a Nikon Coolpix digital camera, because I've realized that to be able to afford the sort of lens and to have the sheer perseverance to lug that thing around is something that I cannot afford right now. So I use a Nikon Coolpix 950. At least in this country, it's known as the best birdwatching camera because it comes with an 80x zoom, so you can really get a good close-up shot of a really fast subject. So, and it's a funny thing because whenever I go to a place where there are a few bird watchers, they come with these huge lenses, and I just go there and I'm like, they're like, you dirty rat.
You know, the Coolpix is pretty popular here too, because the range, you're basically getting up to a 2000 millimeter perspective, whereas I only go to 800 with my G9. So to get out to 2000, and they're so convenient, they're really convenient. And I think this is something that gets lost a lot, I think, when people talk about their photography, is that if you have a great big heavy camera, you've actually got to get it somewhere near the bird to get a shot, and it's hard to move, it's hard to travel. If you're planning to get on a plane, those really great big ones that take up half your suitcase, that's not easy. But just the lens, I don't think should be 10 times the size of the bird, just as a general rule. It's not right. It's scary for the little birds. So I think a Coolpix is a great option, and you're simply getting the best out of the technology, and you're out there, you can carry it, and that's what makes it really good, that you can carry it and that the camera's there whenever you're there.
Ewan, one thing that I hear when people are talking about cameras is megapixels, resolutions. What's the minimum that somebody needs when they're picking up a digital camera to shoot birds?
Well, that they need or that they want?
Well, no, that they need to be able to, because look, let's face it, most people are reproducing their photos they're putting them on Twitter, they're putting them on a website, they're not having them published as full screen, full page shots in glossy magazines like you are. So what sort of resolution, if someone's looking to start out to take quality pics like Christy's taking and putting on his website, what's the minimum spec someone needs to be looking at?
Well, look, I think in general, you want to be trying to aim towards the 20 megapixel point. Things like the Coolpix, they tend to be closer to 16 rather than 20, and 16 is good. And the more pixels you have doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a better photo. The light's coming through the glass, and the glass is doing half the work. And just because if you were to take that Coolpix and just to jam in a 40 megapixel sensor, wouldn't necessarily make the photos better, because the rest of the camera has to work as well. When you're on an SLR, then the lenses, they're larger, and so you've got a bit more scope to get some more pixels. But in the end, what you really do is that you're just going to crop the photo anyway. So the pixels are good for cropping. So that if you've got something close to 20 megapixels, you can basically throw away half that shot and crop down and just get tighter on the bird. So they don't make too many cameras now that aren't actually 20. The models that come out today, they're generally going to be 20 or pretty close to that. And you want to think about the options that will do something like 50 megapixels. Is that going to help you, or is that just going to slow you down? Because that's just like a heap more data. Your cards have to be larger, your hard drives have to be faster. And are you actually getting anything extra by paying extra to get the extra pixels? So the pixels don't really count as much as the camera system. And the Coolpix, if you compare that to something like the Lumix G9, which I use, the Coolpix just has a smaller sensor, and that's why you get that longer reach without having to push the lenses that much further. Does that make sense?
Well, I hope so. Because you're the expert, Ewan. I hope that made sense.
Did that make sense to you, though, Grant? Because you're still thinking, what camera would you buy, perhaps? Yeah,
well, I think I'm understanding about the sensor. That's the area of the camera. It's like the part of the camera brain that determines how the automatic focusing and whatnot is going to happen, and the automatic exposure that it's going to set. Is that what we're talking about?
The sensor will capture the image.
Okay, so
the sensor size, the actual physical size, is like having a really great big piece of film or a tiny piece of film. For the size of the sensor.
It's like the screen at the back of your old film camera that would lift, or the curtain that would lift to allow the light to expose. So it's either the size of one of those frames in an old film as you pulled it back, the size of a slide going back in history. Remember when we had slide nights?
It's the actual film. It's the actual film. The sensor simply replaces the film. Yeah. And when we talk about the number of pixels that the sensor has, that's just how much detail is being captured within that piece of film. Yeah. But the size of the film, the physical size of the film, the larger the sensor, the less light you need for each of those pixels. And that's why they tend to give you some higher quality with a larger sensor. But the problem is you also need a larger lens for the larger sensor. And that gets heavy. And the longer you're trying to shoot, and with the birds, it's all about telephotos. If you're shooting penguins, yes, they're going to come up to you and peck your boot, and they're fine with the wide angle lens, and that's great. But all the other birds, they're too small, they're too far. You want the longest lens that you can possibly get. And that's why the smaller sensors have this extra edge where they can bring the small things closer to you.
Christy, how heavy is your cool pics?
Looks like we've lost him again.
Looks like Christy's gone again. And I thought he was listening intently, but
that's right.
but
We thought,
no.
oh yes, he's really taking it in, was what I saw there. But
So
dropped off again.
We'll wait. I'm sure he will come back again. That's just one of the problems we have with doing shows around the world, but also with lockdowns and the pandemic. Things don't get fixed, they don't get serviced. So maybe he's got a dodgy pit like the one I had out the front of my place, and every time it rained, the internet went south. Let's talk about Christy. Said he'll be back in 2 minutes, so that's pretty cool. What are your favourite birds to shoot, Ewan?
What are my favourite birds to shoot? I'm going to say the pardalote is a pretty good bird to shoot because it's kind of a challenge.
You really like the spotted pardalote, but do you see the striated pardalote very often?
I've got a whole bunch of shots from them when I was doing a shoot in Perth, and I've seen them in Tassie, but no, I haven't seen them terribly often. Whereas the spotters, I seem to find them everywhere I go. When I was up in Swan Hill on a shoot, they were up there. When I was in Royal Park, so many pardalotes in that park now. I just couldn't believe it.
Isn't that one of the delights of urban living? If you like, I knew the pardalote call from being a kid and being out in the country, but hearing it in the urban setting is fantastic, and knowing that there could be hundreds of them in the canopies of all our big eucalypts and whatnot through the city is really good. Now, Christy, I'd asked you a question and you had frozen, and you and I both thought that you were listening intently to the wisdom that Ewen was dispensing, and we were waiting patiently for your response. But,
it just got cut for about.
So I asked you how heavy the Cool Pix is. Roughly what's the weight? Is it? And the purpose of the question is, does it get heavy if you've been out walking around for a couple of hours?
Oh no. Not at all, but the only reason why it doesn't get heavy is I don't wear it around my neck when I'm not photographing it. When I'm walking, I actually roll it up into my fist and I hold it like that, because so when I started bird watching for a few years, it was a mix of trekking plus bird watching. So I needed to be as light as possible, and to get from one obscure village to another, I used to take a lot of buses too. So, and also a huge part of getting help from the locals to ask them, hey, have you seen something near your house? Is you go there with a huge camera, they'll look at you differently. Like, whereas I look like me looking the way I do, I'm not a very put together person. So I just go there and say, hey, and I have this small camera, not small though, but to them, it doesn't look any different. Like, they don't ask me, hey, can I see it? But when I used to carry a huge binoculars, then they used to be like, hey, can I look through it? And I was an outsider. Like, even though I spoke their language, I looked like them, I still came across as an outsider. But with the Cool Pix, I guess it also helps me easily blend in and get people's help to get from one place to another.
And one of the things that used to annoy me when I had my Canon EOS 500, I think it was having the camera around my neck and binoculars used to drive me crazy. So in the end, I dispatched with the camera. How do you go with? Do you take a set of binoculars with you when you're out looking to photograph birds, or do you just rely on looking through the lens?
No, I try to go out with someone who knows where the birds are. I find that's much easier. If you walk out there with a birder, and he'll find them, because like the real birders will hear the birds. They don't see the birds, they hear the birds. They go, oh, okay, there's 3 other kinds of species over here. Let's walk down here and have a look and see what we can find. And so when it comes to cameras, I like to to basically take off the straps. I don't use the straps on any of my cameras, and I have a sling bag, and so the sling goes over the shoulder and the camera can be down low, and I take it out of the bag when I need it, or I just hold it in the hand, exactly what Christy was saying. I hold it in the hand, and when people see you pull out something like the Lumix G9, they don't really blink an eye. The camera looks harmless, absolutely harmless. And that's good. You don't want to be drawing attention to yourself if you don't have to. Whereas if someone's walking through the park with a great big 800mm lens that goes on their full frame SLR, they're going to look pretty weird, actually. That's not good in an urban kind of landscape. They think that you're going to take photos of their children or something. It's a bit creepy.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Christy, before you disappeared, who's your photography mentor and your bird watching mentor? If you're asking people where to find the birds, tight knit community, is it in your neck of the woods?
So when I don't think I've had either. So photography was something that I had learned in college, and one of the reasons why I stopped pursuing it was because of the professor. There was like a couple of bad incidents that like turned me off big time from using the camera like for many years. So besides that, bird watching too, like when I first started, I felt a lot of love towards birds, and I think it made me come across as a bit pretentious to the people who had already been doing it. I don't know what happened, but I didn't get good vibes at all. And for me, the moment I detect any sort of condescension or any sort of ego, I just like back off, because I'm like, I don't have time for this stuff. So whenever, like, there was one, the black-winged kite, right? So it comes in a few molds. It changes its plumage during the year. I didn't know this. So every time I saw one, I'm like, buzzard, or eagle. And they were like, that's just a black-winged kite. And even the way they had replied to my questions on a Facebook community, it just turned me off. And I said, I'm going to do this by myself, blinded and like completely some cartoonish. And that's why it took me a lot of years to actually have some knowledge about them. But right now, there's a community on Twitter called Indie Abes. So anytime I have any doubt about bird watching, I just ping it to them saying, hey, can somebody help? And they're experienced birders. They look at the moon and say, there's going to be a shorebird coming here next month. I'm like, what? Like, who do you? It doesn't make sense to me. So they're very experienced, so I rely on them. But the funny thing is, only 3 people have come out bird watching with me in the past 9 years, because I don't feel comfortable sharing it. There have been some birding walks where people whom I'm very cool with on Twitter, they seem like really nice guys. We seem to be of the same mindset too, but I don't want to share my bird watching with them. And it's not that I want to take a photograph, they don't, but I can't stop thinking about them when I'm seeing birds. And I don't want to think about people when I'm seeing birds. I just want to think about the birds and maybe some my own issues, right? Like when somebody else brings in any energy, good or bad, it just feels unnecessary.
I think there, Grant, there's a really interesting point there, that often people who really, really understand the birds don't really understand humans.
I was going to ask you for a bird photography horror story, Ewen, because I think you've had a few, haven't you?
Oh, look, I can't name names. I think that would be wrong. But I do think it's interesting, the point that you make there, Christy, that you actually go to the Twitter community maybe more than your Facebook community. And I think they're really different communities. And I think that's a really good point. I have so many positive things that happen on Twitter. And within the Facebook space, I don't know, there just seems to be a bit more ego. Whereas in the Twitter space, people seem a bit more real. Is that how it comes across to you?
Would you like my view on that? Well, I think the people that Twitter sort of self-select. So you hashtag bird photography, hashtag bird seen in 2021 or whatever, self-selects it down to people who are into that. So if we're in the bird Twitter space, I think bird Twitter is pretty nice. The problem with Facebook is that everybody's there. You know, and the problem the problem with everybody being there is that all the people that you really consciously try and avoid are there. and it's much harder to select yourself away from them. So I think,
like, how do we get away from them on Facebook?
mate, I don't use Facebook. Basically, I post stuff. I post the podcasts and everything to Facebook. And another podcast I do, we actually do check the page and engage because it's where that community is. But boy, I don't do private messages or anything with anyone I know on Facebook. I don't do Facebook because my neighbours are probably on there. I don't want to hang out with them. Whereas I think bird Twitter is a pretty safe space. But there is one thing about bird people, I think, and I think this is when if there's 10 of you standing at the side of a lake looking at some vagrant that has come in and it's in eclipse plumage, and then Christy turns up and goes, "Oh my God, I've never seen that. That's unbelievable," because you don't know it's in eclipse plumage. Yeah. An awful lot of birders will look at you. Yeah. So I think there's a bit of that, but that's like being in any kind of club, being in the know. There's those who are in the know and those who aren't.
One of the things I've found in the past
great
also...
if you don't care about what people think. I think if you just accept the love that comes naturally and flat out just ignore the hate. I mean, like, you can do it. It's not life. So you can actually accept just the love and say no to the hate. So
using people and phrases. So.
My block list is like so long. It's ridiculous. Yeah, probably the worst experience I had with actual birders was when I'd actually spent about a year or two trying to travel with a particular friend who knows a lot more about birds than I do. And he got really frustrated with me taking photos because he just wanted to move on to the next spot and see some other birds. And he was literally yelling at me in the middle of this park because he was so angry at me for standing there taking a photo and waiting for because I was just being patient. And I don't care how many birds I see in one day. If I just see one bird, but I have a really good exchange and that bird comes in close, then for me, that's much better than seeing like 1,000 birds. So, and for him, it wasn't that way at all. And he literally got angry and started to yell at me in the park. And I'm just like, okay, well, I don't think we should do this anymore.
But birding, and I think bird photography is an intensely personal pursuit. I think it would be a very hard thing to be social when you're birding. And I think particularly for what you're saying, Ewen, is that everybody's emotional connection with what they're seeing is very different. I had a similar experience to you once, Ewen, where I was just engrossed watching a family of moorhen, right? And my childhood friend, who I used to do a lot of walking around the woodlands of the Mornington Peninsula with, was very annoyed because he wanted to race on and see something much more interesting than a couple of moorhen. But right. So I never go bird watching with anybody really because I don't know anyone socially who is into bird watching.
Yeah. No, the difference is that I'd hired this guy to help me find birds to get shots. Like, we were actually doing a shoot for a client. And he was my hired gun to find the birds. He was my expert. And it's, dude, we are literally here to get the photos. What part of this do you not understand?
He's got to do what you want. That's rule number one.
Yeah, that's right. He'd forgotten. No, it's not just here for you to see birds. We're actually here to do some work for a client and get a result. Which is interesting also because for me, those kind of projects for me are just wonderful. I love them because now the photography has a purpose. There's a reason for me to be there. We're trying to get beautiful shots that will encourage other people to see what we see when we go out in the wild. So to be paid to take photos of birds, I don't think there's anything more wonderful than that. What a great way to spend your day.
Have you got any aspirations to be commissioned to take photos, Christy?
I mean, I would love to be able to help write a book about in conservation of birds. And also, there's something that my wife is an artist, so we are planning on doing a series of children's books to help kids get into birding.
Great.
Very good. Very good. Well, Christy, I just want to ask you one more question before we wrap up, and that's, are you looking to upgrade your camera gear? And if yes, what are you aspiring to collect next?
So there is Nikon, the next level, which is a P1000. And so I was in a quagmire last year when I wanted to buy one because they said it's like a lot heavier than what I have right now, but the videos of much better resolution. So as somebody who like now it's my new thing to shoot videos because I love video editing. So I wanted to shoot a bunch, maybe one day make a documentary, hopefully. So I am considering buying that as a backup camera, like only when I'm going to, when I know I'm going to shoot a lot of videos that day. Otherwise, I think I'm pretty much happy with this Nikon Coolpix 950 that I have.
Once you get into the video side of things, everything is suddenly more work, more expensive. You got to have it properly stabilized. I don't know. It's the video stuff. Don't jump in too fast is my advice.
Sure. I've been very hesitant too. That's why like over the last year, I've not really bought it. I was just like looking at it and I'm like, do I need to? Should I? Like, but again, I keep thinking, what is my end game? I don't think I'm going to make a sustainable income from this. And I don't think I want to because I don't know who said this. My very good friend of mine claims that it's Jeffrey Archer, but I don't know. So he said that you generally tend to make the most money what you're second best at. So, so for me, I think I'm like really good at spotting birds and writing up about them. I think that's the thing that I was put on this earth to perhaps pursue, but reasonably good at helping businesses and technology companies with their marketing activities. So,
okay, that's good to know.
so, I think I'm going to stick to that. And this is just going to be, I think it'll be a passion project, but I don't think it's going to be I'm not looking at it because looking at it as an income generation opportunity, especially in India, this sounds frustrating to me. So.
I think also that when the thing that you really love, that's really, really creative and gives you joy, when that becomes your source of income or your only source of income, you can kill off the bit that you really enjoyed and the bit that you loved. For me, I don't just shoot birds. They're part of my spectrum. So if I only shot birds and I had to make an income from that, I might not enjoy the process as much.
Yeah, that's always a worry, isn't it? When something becomes work. And for me, the thing that I always determine whether I want to do something or not is whether it raises my stress level. And if it starts to raise my stress level, I'm no longer interested in doing it. Yeah. And I'm probably too fussy or whatnot there. But when you get grey hair, or Ewen, when you start to shave it all off, it starts to factor in your decision making a lot more than it used to. And you think, do I want to spend time talking to these people?
It's not fussy though. I think it's very practical because I'm sure like when we grew up, mental health wasn't even discussed. Like at least when I grew up here, I didn't even know of the combination of words mental health till I was 26. Right? So I think this approach, even though we might be doing this a bit later than sooner, I think it's fantastic that we are this fussy, you know.
I think we have to also recognise that there's a lot of white fella privilege when it comes to even choosing what you want to do and how you will do it, because a lot of people don't really have the luxury to even consider those options. So I'm a bit tongue-in-cheek when I say that, and I recognise that it's a very lucky situation that I find myself in, being able to pick and choose. Now, Ewen, my last photography kind of question, because I'm living back in the Stone Age when I'm talking about my Canon EOS, I think it was a 500, I can't remember. But back when I was looking at cameras, you couldn't change lenses between your Nikons and your Pentax and your Canons and your Minoltas or whatever. Now, has that been standardized?
Not a lot. Not a lot. You still have different camera systems. And so when we talk about a camera system, it means that if you go out and buy the current version of the Canon, you won't be able to use your older lenses on the new Canon without something to adapt. And even then, the performance may or may not be so great. And then when you go across to the Nikons, it's really hard to put the Nikon lens onto a Canon camera body and all this sort of stuff. You're buying into one camera system, which is important to keep in mind. It's not just the camera you're buying, it's what are the options of the lenses you're going to be able to put onto the camera. So when a brand new camera system comes out and there's only 3 or 4 lenses to choose from, that can be a problem, because if they don't have the lens that you need when that first actually comes out, then that won't help you much. So once you purchase into a particular camera system, chances are you'll stick with that for a very long time, if not the rest of your life, because you'll have to say that if you were to go from your Canon that you have now to the Nikon, you'll have to get rid of all of the lenses you have and buy a whole new bunch of the lenses as well. And you're spending more on the lenses than the camera body. So it costs you quite a bit to change over from one camera system to another. And of course, in the case of Christy, it doesn't have an interchangeable lens. The lens is part of the camera. Is that right, with the Coolpix?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, so when he buys a whole new Coolpix, he gets a whole new lens with that Coolpix. And essentially what we're talking about is that if you take the idea of the compact camera that does the zoom range, this is like a larger, much more capable kind of compact camera. So they're often called a bridge camera, because you're putting all the bits that go into an SLR, but you're not getting the choice to change lenses. That's all. So there's so much choice out there, and it's the choice that makes the decisions hard.
Yes. Well, maybe Ewan, there's an episode of Photography Friday just waiting to be had, talking about the benefits and the disadvantages of different systems. Is there anything that you would want to say about the Coolpix against another all-in-one camera?
To Christy or to me?
To the audience in general, but that's a question to you. Yeah.
Look, I think in general, the more you compare brands, the more you miss kind of the point, and that there's much more range within a brand than between the brands. Okay, so if you think about the Coolpix, Nikon, they make an SLR range, they make a mirrorless full frame range, they make a mirrorless partial frame range. They have a lot of different camera systems within that one brand. So that's what makes it hard to compare. And in general, when it comes to brands, pick the one that you like. Pick the one that you pick it up and go, yes, I think the controls are in the spot that I like to have them, or I like the way the menu works, or I just like the logo because my dad had one when I was a kid. It doesn't matter. The brand, for the most part, does not matter. Your lens, you want the right lens when it comes to birds, because the birds are very small and they're hard to get close to. And so you do want, a really long lens. You want some stabilization, and you want an auto focus that works really well. So within a particular brand, some cameras will do that better than others. And that's where you need to spend your time to research. And that's why you've jumped onto the Coolpix, because it works really well for you.
It felt good in my hand, and I said, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. And now that you've had some time and you've spent years with that camera, it's going to be hard for you to even contemplate to change away from that camera system, because you know how it works, you know how it's going to respond to certain kinds of light and certain kinds of conditions, and so you have confidence in that camera, and that's a really good reason to stick with it.
It's like a car too. Like at this point, I've had my car for 8 years. I'm terrified of changing it, because I'm like, I know her, I know how it's going to perform in the rain, up the hill and the dirt. But a new one, I'm like, hey, let's have breakfast first,
Yeah, that's right. my car got wiped out by a kangaroo a couple of years ago, and the car got written off, and we had to plead to the insurance company to actually repair the car, because the thought of actually having to start over and shop for a brand new car, and I knew that car could cope and survive a kangaroo hit, and I was fine. So I trusted that car, and we still have that car now. We got the car back, we got it fixed, and we feel so much safer in that car than anything else we could buy.
Yeah.
Gee, I can't even have a car story. I got rid of my car, Christy. So I've been about 6 or 7 years now without, I think it's coming into 7 years without a car now. So, and I think only twice in all that time have I thought, gee, I wish I had the car. Because umbrellas are pretty good, taxis are pretty good, buses are pretty good. But I can't just go and drive off into the outback. I need to do a bit more planning than that. So, Christy, what's next, do you think, on your Verse Herder site? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, so I was actually intending to start blogging on it again last year, again just before the lockdown hit, because I had not used it for about a year's time. I had just kept it aside, and also my brain's too small to handle speaking to strangers in more than one platform. So once this Twitter thing, in fact, it took off a little bit, like only when I posted about 2 years ago saying, hey man, I'm not a photographer, but here's some crap that I shot. And then it got like 1,000 likes, and I'm like, what's happening here? So after that, I just ignored my blog, because like even now, and I hope the people who follow me on Twitter don't hear this, but I'm just tired of replying to comments. Like, I don't, like, stop, please. Like, I wouldn't be posting this photo if I didn't think it was good, and I wouldn't be writing that caption if I didn't think it made sense. Don't just tell me that, tell me something else. Just, hey, great photo. It actually causes some stress in me. So for me to handle the blog and Twitter would be like really difficult. So once I start blogging again, maybe Twitter will take a bit of a backseat, but my brain's not equipped to handle more than one social platform at a time.
That sounds wise.
You started podcasting and that sort of ran its course. Do you find that mixing and matching the media is a challenge?
It is hard. So at the moment, I'm working on a project where I have to edit a lot of video, and my brain has to get into that space. And when we're shooting the video, it's a completely different world to any of the still stuff that we've done. I just did a shoot for Swan Hill, really great place to go and travel. We were basically doing stills, but I shot a little bit of video in there too. So now I've got to edit that down as well. So you're going from stills to video. I have to write an article for a travel publication. They want that in a couple of days, and I thought I'd have that done by now, but I didn't. I've got my blog, mostly on Twitter. I don't think of Twitter, for me, Twitter's not really work and it's stuff. It's just me getting angry about the lack of responsibility with our federal government and the appalling state of the media in Australia, if not globally. So Twitter's not work. But, you know, when you work for yourself, you do have to have lots of different skills. You can't just do one thing. And actually the podcast that we did last year, that was really great. I learned a lot through that process. We did that with my book, Reimagine. So every single podcast was an episode of the book. And so that always had the finite scope. It was going to end at some point. So I don't feel that I need to do that every week or every month and all that sort of stuff. So I'm glad I did it. I learned some things, and things I learned from that now come into the video work I do and stuff like that. So every step we take is a step forward. And it doesn't mean, the idea that you can do anything doesn't mean you have to do everything.
Yes, you most definitely shouldn't do everything, because you won't be very good at most of the everythings that you do. Well, Christy, been a delight to meet you. I'm looking forward to following more of your bird Twitter. So Indie Aves is a good place to find you on Twitter. But where do you use a particular hashtag?
No, I don't, because I like the one which says Twitter Nature Community. So that's the only hashtag that I use these days, because that and birds, if you're looking for these two hashtags you qualify, because I didn't want to drill it down further into only if you're a bird watcher in India or like only if you're into this. Like, hey, you like nature, you like birds, just check out my stuff.
So nature community, that's not one I
Twitter
usually
nature
check out.
community.
Yeah. I'm always watching bird Twitter, but also like you, Ewan, Ozpol to rant and rave, to get upset about the lack of
Governance.
threatened species protection in this country. That's my hobby horse.
It's really hard to keep it nice at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I've got one account where I don't try and be nice. I don't try and keep it nice. I try and be nice on the Bird Emergency podcast account because I don't want to upset people. But yeah, and look, for anyone who's listening, I don't plan on giving up the Bird Emergency anytime soon. I'll be giving that up when there are no bird people to talk to about birds. So that could be a very, very long time.
That's great to hear.
Ewan, which Twitter account do you reckon people should follow you on?
Euster, Ewster, Euster. That's how you.
And of course, Blurds, hashtag Blurds.
Blurs. That's right. That's right. I need to post some more. I need to go out and take some more blurry shots so that I can plump up the feed on that account.
I'll put in a request. I've just released the superb fairy wren episode of the Bird Emergency. So have you got a blurry fairy wren?
I do. I've got some excellent blurry, superb fairy wrens.
Very good. And have you got a masked lapwing that could be blurry?
No, I rarely point a lens at a masked lapwing, I must be honest.
Yeah.
It's so annoying.
Well, you'll have to listen to the masked lapwing episode. You'll learn a lot about the masked lapwing. Very intriguing.
I certainly will. I can see the podcast there on your feed. So yeah, I'll have to find some time to dig into that while I try to sort out whether or not I can actually cross the border sometime in the next 2 weeks.
Well, I hope you can. I can just see that Blurds has done a retweet. Good on you, Blurds. So you and look, let's let people in. You were about to go on a fantastic tour, and we've got a COVID lockdown that's just started here that looks like that's blown your tour out. Is there a chance that you can resurrect that? Well,
look, for the last couple of days, every time I think we've got an avenue where we can continue to run the trip, within around about 10 minutes of actually coming up with a plan and talking to people, something else happens and it all gets shut down again. I think at the moment I think that the way it's gone out today, I don't think there's much hope that we can actually do this trip. So we have a private plane that flies across the outback, and I can't believe I get to do this almost every year, but there are people who can afford this, and I'm so grateful that there are. And we basically fill up this plane with people. We hop across from the Flinders Ranges to Uluru to Purnululu and out to Arnhem Land, and we just see some amazing parts of this country. This is just an incredible country. And we see some great birds, from the tiny little finches through to the jabiru. We see some really, really beautiful birds on this trip. And I haven't been able to run it for around about, the last one we ran was in the winter of 2019, and so we couldn't run it last year. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to run it this year either. And I'm pretty darn sad, actually, because I love actually just being out on the wild places, because when you live in the middle of the CBD, it's really nice, but you need to connect with nature. You need to connect with trees and with dirt and sand and rocks and birds. And this is how I do it. I get out and I go and spend time where there aren't people and there are birds. And I'm sad we're not going to get to do that in the upcoming weeks because all the borders are closing. And I guess I'm going to have to enjoy some more of my wife's amazing cooking instead. And I'm not going to be losing any weight this month.
Well, Ewan, we can always find a podcast to do. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. And maybe you can help me out with planning I want to do your tour route, but I want to do it on an e-bike.
Cool. That sounds like it's going to join you on that.
Only take me about 3 years.
Years ago, I tried to plan a trip where we would actually take a couple of motorcycles right through this kind of route. And the bit we struggled was actually the Pilbara, because actually the fuel stops between spots was too far. We weren't sure how we were going to get through this particular section of the Pilbara, and maybe an e-bike's the way to do it.
Yeah, I'm researching it now, and then after we've done Australia, I then want to do the south, like Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and then try to get out to India, Christy. But I need a sponsor, Ewan.
That's right. It's a bit of a cash flow problem there.
I need a sponsor if I'm going to spend the rest of my life on an e-bike.
Perhaps a question here for Christy is, Christy, where else in India would you like to go and just to spend some quality time with birds? If you had 2 weeks to go anywhere in India, where would you like to go next?
Northeast India. That's again, they're even more poorly represented than South India. It's like they don't exist, and it's really, really sad. And they have some of the most beautiful collections of birds because of their proximity to the hills, and some fantastic stuff there.
And so is this like Darjeeling?
Darjeeling, Meghalaya, Mizoram, anywhere in the northeast side. I just want to go there, and I want to spend time not just for the birds, but also to see my country. That's treated worse than South India, and I have this gigantic love for them. So
you have such a wonderful country too, and such a variety of landscapes and terrain and habitats, and of course lots of cultures too. But it's such a big country, and there's such a lot to see, and yet I guess not everyone in India gets to see their whole country, do they?
No, I would reckon a very small percentage get the shocking thing is we have this motto called unity in diversity. That's our Republic, but then it's a facade because like I cannot travel to more than like 50% of India because I wouldn't know the language. Like I'd be completely clueless. So I don't speak an ounce of Hindi. Like I don't speak any Hindi whatsoever. And it's not that we didn't learn a bit of it in school, but like ever since we were young, we've been not taught, but we've been socially conditioned to not learn Hindi because it's not our language.
Okay.
It's a whole thing over here. So because of my lack of knowledge in Hindi, I cannot travel to most places I'd like to because without a guide of some sort. Because I don't speak any Hindi whatsoever, so it would be very difficult for me to get around. And that would also apply to people who only speak Hindi. Like if they come to South India, some places do know Hindi, but then a large part would like look at them bug-eyed, wondering what the hell they're saying. So.
Yeah, the same thing happens in China too. Like I've had guides in China who their Mandarin is very good, but they speak a version of it that comes out of Beijing, the Putonghua, or the way they speak their Mandarin. And as soon as they get out to like the Western or Central China, and the accents are so different, the dialects are different, and suddenly they can't talk to a taxi driver, even though they think they're speaking the same language.
The funny thing, like over here, is in the airports, we hear mostly Hindi. And that's part of the reason why we are fighting it too, because we see Hindi and hear Hindi in a lot of places in our part of the country, it's not anybody's primary language. But so when I sit in the airplane, I get frustrated. Like when I hear it, I don't know what they're saying. What if it's get off? Like there's an alien on the wing, like some Twilight.
Parochialism is everywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, I did remember, Christy, that I forgot to ask you a question. What's the bird that you most want to see in India?
Actually, I saw it 2 years ago, black baza, and it was a bird that I heard that is the rarest bird to visit my city. But I didn't see it in my city. I saw it about 500 kilometers away at a hill station, and we were just going for a drive, me and my wife, and I stopped and I saw a hawk with a crest, and I was like, hey, hawk with a crest, and it was really far away. So when I zoomed in and I realized it was a black baza, I almost dropped the camera, and I think that was the first time my wife saw me cry. It just started streaming down my face. I'm like, and she's like, "What?" I said, "This is it." And I had not told her this was my dream bird. I hadn't told many people it was my dream bird too. But at the back of my mind, I thought this was one bird that I'm going to think about how I didn't see it like when I pass away. And after that, I've not had this next dream bird yet. Like That's why the gift, it's just a gift. It's an absolute gift.
Ewan, have you cried when you've seen a bird?
No.
I cried plenty of times seeing bird. That's not the first.
I think that's great that there's that emotional connection, and that I think it's like Collingwood winning a premiership in football.
To be honest, for me, it's more like I cry if I don't see the birds. It's more, there are times when I go to places and I think about what that landscape looked like before a whole bunch of people jumped off a ship and just basically took over this country. And I think about the birds that aren't there now, and I think about what we've lost. And that makes me really sad. When I do actually spend time with birds, and I do have those really beautiful moments. 3 weeks ago, we were in Dalesford running this workshop, and I simply popped out to the edge of the paddock just to see if there was any birds out there. And in the space of this half an hour, 3 kinds of thornbills came through. 3 kinds of thornbills, tiny little birds. I got these amazing shots of all of them. And I just thought...
So you had the striated, the brown and the yellow-tailed?
Correct. Yellow rumped, yeah. And I just thought this was just so beautiful. And like most people in this country would have no frickin' idea what the hell I just said when I say 3 kinds of thornbills. They didn't know there was 1 kind of thornbill. And it was just really beautiful. It was really lovely. And I felt really lucky to be there in that moment. But I don't cry because I just feel really great. Yeah. Whereas when I go to other places and think, oh no, they've gone and taken away the habitat where lots of birds used to be here, that makes me really sad.
Christy, I know I've been about to say goodbye for about 10 minutes, but I sometimes see birds near my house and I'm torn. I think, wow, isn't it amazing? I'm seeing these birds here on the edge of the city. But then I have that, I'm channeling Ewan a bit and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're only here because we've stuffed up the rest of the country and they got nowhere else to live. Is that a similar situation as the development pushes out from the city that you live in?
Absolutely. So the place where I live in, I used to come here in the early 2000s. We used to come here to get drunk and do things that we didn't want the authorities to find out, because it is just jungle here. It is just completely forested space. There was no road, just a mud road, and this was, I think, late 90s. So once this IT boom happened, this entire forested land became the IT corridor of Chennai. So it was just zoop. It was just like one gigantic strip of tar, and then these companies started putting on both sides, and then came the residential complexes. So right now, that's why I think perhaps, and this is something that had not crossed my mind before now, that maybe one of the reasons I don't do much of balcony birding is because I see all the birds congregate towards the lake, and that's the only place they have, because the rest of the place are occupied by people like me. And that's the inherent guilt that I guess I don't want to be reminded on a daily basis. But I'd like to think
Sorry, are you finding unusual birds in the urban setting because they're just being displaced from the wilder places?
I think they are, because in certain places I see, I'm not sure if I can call it unnatural number, but like, for example, hoopoes, right? There is this one spot which is at the edge of Chennai. That's when most of the buildings, they stop and there's a little bit of land, and there's just a bunch of birds right at the edge. And I'd like to think it's coincidence, but I'm pretty sure that it's not.
Oh well, let's all see if we can exert some pressure, and improve the lot for our little birds, our little brown jobs, and our little brown jobs that no one pays any attention to.
That's right. My blurbs.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Photography Friday. We've done another one, Ewan.
Great.
I don't know who I'll chase up for the next one, Ewan, but I think we might talk perhaps about selecting a camera system, and perhaps I might do a little bit more research and look at new versus secondhand and throw some options at you. You can say, good idea.
Sounds like a good idea.
And Christy, it's verse herder or What?
The blog's Verserda and my Twitter is the Content Birder. So and
That's right. Content.
Content Birder. I just wanted to also add that this is the first time I think I've spent like an hour and a half speaking to total strangers, and it's just felt very organic, and I felt absolutely no discomfort whatsoever, and just like it was a very fun conversation for me.
Well, look, we're bird people. We're all nice. Bird people are all nice. It might be a bit weird.
We're weird but nice.
And it was fantastic talking to someone for an hour and a half from India, Christy, who didn't ask me one question about anyone who's in the Australian cricket team. Now, that was great.
The funny thing is, I watched cricket a lot during the mid-90s. Baggy green, like that team with Mark Taylor's team, is that I swore by them. If when India beat them, I used to get into these huge fights in school and things. I'm a Markwa guy all day, every day, and he trended yesterday, and I was like, Markwa trend. My last match that I saw was when Steve Waugh hit his century, and I said, I'm stopping cricket. That's it. So.
Was that was a century
last match in somewhere in the UK, I'm not sure, against Nasser Hussain's team. He scored that century in his last test match, and I said, goodbye cricket. That's it.
Christy, you've just proven that you are so much more into cricket than me or Ewen.
Oh, you'll still watch. Okay, my bad.
No, I stopped watching the cricket because of the commentators were just appalling. And then there's just, I don't trust anyone isn't actually cheating in our national cricket team, and I just can't watch it.
Yeah,
I just can't.
I just can't go. I can't go with cricketers being personalities and celebrities. I just think, mate, you can hit a ball with a piece of wood, whoopee do. But anyway,
100%.
Don't get me wrong, Christy. I enjoy cricket, but cricket's like playing tennis in your backyard or kicking the footy around the park. That's all it is.
Yeah.
All
right.
And birds are better. Now, of course, follow the Bird Emergency. The website very soon to be relaunched. So all the old episodes will be up on the website with new pictures and whatnot and some updated bios, because some of the guests who were doing what they were doing when I first spoke to them aren't doing that anymore and are doing something new. So we're just updating it. So there's the teaser. And Photography Friday and Tour Guide Thursday is also coming up. So that'll keep us all busy during lockdown. I'm Grant Williams. He's Ewen Bell. And he's Christy Bharath. This has been the Bird Emergency. Thanks for listening. Bye.